You know, one of the things that really appeals to me is a TV show or a movie with a tight, efficient screenplay. The kind of thing where every scene and carefully crafted piece of dialogue either advances the story, tells you more about the characters involved, or builds your understanding of the world they live in. Sometimes they even manage to do all three at the same time. For example, the Edgar Wright movie Hot Fuzz has got to be one of the most efficient and perfectly balanced scripts I've ever seen, constantly feeding the audience important information that rewards careful viewing and gives them all the hints, clues and setups needed to make the payoffs work properly later on, but never bombarding them with so much exposition that it becomes overwhelming, or pulling contrivances and sudden revelations out its arse to explain stuff that was never even hinted at before, unlike some movies I could name. Which makes it kind of frustrating when screenwriters decide to go in exactly the opposite direction, hammering together tedious and long-winded scripts that take forever to advance their stories and seem almost designed to waste as much time as humanly possible. And honestly, it's tough to think of a better example than The Mandalorian, which is practically a case study in stretching out 10-minute concepts into 40-minute episodes. The first 2 seasons were already pretty bad for this kind of thing, relying on lots of slow walking and very deliberate dialogue to pad out the runtime, but I think it really fell off a cliff in season 3 when the writers seemed to abandon all concept of meaningful storytelling. And to illustrate my point, I'm going to break down episode 2 of season 3, which in my opinion has got to be one of the most clunky, inefficient pieces of script writing I've seen in years. And I've seen a lot. Believe that. Now, the general backstory for this episode is that Mando got busted for removing his helmet, which is a big no-no in Mandalorian culture, and it basically got him exiled from his clan. To redeem himself, he needs to go to the Mandalorian homeworld, journey down into the underground mines beneath the planet, and bathe in the living waters of Mandalore. Nice stuff. The only problem is that the planet is now a toxic, uninhabited wasteland. Or so everyone tells him at least. I guess no one bothered to actually check though. So the first thing he does is drop in to see Apollo Creed because he's decided he needs backup for this mission, so he wants to rebuild the assassin droid from season 1. That goes about as well as you might expect. And he's told that the droid needs a special part that apparently nobody has anymore because it's convenient to the plots. So Mando's like, whatever, and then he goes to Bo-Katan for help next, but she's like, nah, it'll be fine, because she's sad that she doesn't have the Darksaber anymore. So basically, nobody's willing or able to help him in his totally arbitrary fetch quest, which is where episode 2 picks up. The episode begins on the planet Tatooine, because of course it has to begin on Tatooine. Gotta make use of that volume screen somehow. Anyway, hillbilly mechanic lady is having an argument with an alien, and then some droids, and then some Jawas before Mando arrives. And in case you were wondering, yes, this entire scene is completely irrelevant to the plot, and it goes on for 2 minutes and 5 seconds by my watch. So Mando shows up and asks for the special part that he needs to rebuild his murder droid, but she's like, nah, we don't have it. Take this R5 droid instead. So he takes it and he has a very lengthy chat about nothing in particular, and finally he's on his way to Mandalore with Baby Yoda in tow. We're 6 minutes into the episode by the way, and nothing significant has actually happened yet. Then they arrive at Mandalore and there's another lengthy flying sequence where Mando tells us a bunch of stuff that we already know. This sequence lasts for a grand total of 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So they land on the surface and Mando sends R5 to scout ahead and measure the atmosphere or something, which kind of baffles me because isn't the point of an atmosphere that it's, you know, kind of all around you? And haven't you already been flying through it for the past 2 minutes and 20 seconds? Nah, whatever. So R5 trundles off into a nearby cave, very slowly, and then they lose contact with it, which forces Mando to exit the ship and go after it. This sequence lasts for 2 minutes and 50 seconds this time. I'd like to point out that we're barely 11 minutes into this episode, and about 7 of those minutes have more or less just been pointless filler. So Mando goes into the cave to look for the droid very slowly, and then he gets attacked by some Morlock people because the script needs an action sequence, I guess. And then he takes the droid back out to the ship and goes back inside with Baby Yoda this time. Why is he taking Baby Yoda into an unknown environment that's already proven to be extremely hazardous when he could just as easily order the ship to lift off with Baby Yoda inside and circle the area safely until he gets back? Don't know. What I do know is that we're now 14 minutes into the episode and we're only now doing something that could have been accomplished in the first 5 minutes. So they push on underground and there's more extremely slow walking and looking at stuff, which isn't strictly a bad thing in this case because this is an important moment that deserves time to breathe. Mando's taking his first steps on the homeworld of his species, a place that no one has set foot in years, just like the Moria sequence in Fellowship of the Ring. In fact, a lot like the Moria sequence in Fellowship of the Ring. The problem though is that this show is fucking riddled with slow, ponderous walks like this, and if this sort of thing happens all the time, then there's nothing unique or significant about it now. Anyway, wouldn't you know it, Mando gets ambushed and captured by a giant spider droid thing. I mean, this really feels like the kind of enemy that you should have wiped the floor with at this point, but whatever. Baby Yoda is now the only person in a position to help him, so instead of using his mighty force powers to free him or crush the droid out of existence, he instead decides to fly all the way back up through the mines, past the Morlocks, into the ship, back to Bo-Katan, and just hope that somehow his arrival is enough for her to totally understand the situation, and that she's willing to help despite telling Mando to piss off earlier, and that she's able to get there in time to rescue him. I mean, how long does all this shit actually take? Hours? Days? Don't know, but what I do know is that we're now 23 minutes into the episode and about to redo all of the stuff we did previously to get to this point. So Bo-Katan flies all the way back to Mandalore, walks back into the cave very slowly, looks down on the mines of Moria again, fights the Morlock people again, then kills the giant spider droid thing and rescues Mando with the Darksaber. Then he walks into a pond and somehow manages to sink about 500 feet underwater in a matter of seconds, and she has to go in and save him again.
Basically, no one else has a better idea, so fuck it.
The thing is, all of this stuff is designed to do precisely one thing: waste time. It's the writing equivalent of busy work, having characters approach their objectives in the slowest, most inefficient way possible, backtracking and repeating the same events in the same locations, and having people fall victim to contrived problems that they absolutely should be able to solve themselves. And why? Because it's a show without the creativity to come up with good ideas, or the skill to implement them in a smart and interesting way. The whole narrative thrust of this episode is to get Bo-Katan and Mando to team up and go to Mandalore together so he can redeem himself with his clan and give her the Darksaber so she can fulfill her destiny to lead her people back there. The stuff that actually facilitates all of this could be trimmed down to about 10 minutes of screen time, and everything else around it is just there to pad it out. So what could we do with these two characters instead? Well, imagine for a moment that Mando goes to Bo-Katan, and instead of being sent on his way and wasting about 20 minutes of screen time getting them back together, he strikes a deal with her. Come with me to Mandalore and help me get to the magical bullshit pond, and I'll find a way to give you back the Darksaber. We'd get to see them working together to get through the mines of Moria, fighting enemies, overcoming problems and interacting with each other along the way. There's tension and mistrust, and the stakes are high because each of them desperately wants to get something from the other. The audience is left to question whether one's going to betray the other, and maybe they each have a chance to sell out their partner for their own benefit, but ultimately choose to do the right thing and battle through to the end together, gaining a better understanding and respect for each other along the way. It's simple stuff, but you'd be surprised how effective it is to take two popular characters and force them to work together to overcome a difficult challenge. And it's infinitely more interesting than watching the TV equivalent of Player 2 speedrunning the same level that stumped their mate. And the real ball ache here is that The Mandalorian is practically built around time-wasting, inefficient scripts like this. And it's all time that could have been so much better spent giving characters actual personalities and understandable motivations, expanding on the world and the lore, constructing interesting scenarios, and writing dialogue that does more than vaguely shuffle the plot in a forward direction. It's sloppy, lazy, unimaginative writing of the lowest order, taking ideas that feel like they were scrawled on post-it notes in a 5-minute brainstorming session and pumping them up into full-length episodes without worrying about pesky little details like, is there enough story to actually justify this? Or does this even make sense? But hey, if you happen to be an aspiring writer looking to hone their craft, then it's basically a textbook example of how not to write screenplays. So shit man, maybe The Mandalorian does have a useful purpose after all. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.